The hum of my boots against the hardwood floor of my childhood home in Boise, Idaho, felt foreign, like stepping onto a stage where I no longer belonged. I'm Elena Carver, 35, a former Air Force engineer who just returned from a grueling 4-year deployment in Afghanistan. The dust of Kandahar still clung to my uniform, my shoulders stiff from hauling equipment through sandstorms, my mind etched with the roar of jet engines and the weight of decisions made under fire. You'd think walking in with that history would earn a warm glance, a welcome back, maybe an embrace from the people who raised me. Instead, my mom's voice sliced through the hallway like a blade. "Elena, did you have to track all that dirt in?" Her tone was sharp, her eyes narrowing at my combat boots, and I froze, the duffel bag slipping slightly in my grip. The sting wasn't the dirt. It was the realization that nothing had shifted in this house, not her expectations, not their view of me. Dinner that night was a stark mirror. My brother Nate, all smiles with his new promotion at the bank, tossed a jab my way. "Still playing soldier, huh? You look like you crawled out of a war movie." My sister Mia giggled, avoiding my gaze, while my dad shoveled mashed potatoes onto his plate, oblivious to my presence. They chatted about stock portfolios, Mia's upcoming art show, Nate's golf swing. Anything but the 4 years I'd spent recalibrating drones under enemy fire or training pilots to evade missiles. I sat there, the clatter of silverware a stark contrast to the silence about my scars. Have you ever sat at a table with your own blood and felt like a ghost? Like your voice could shatter the air but no one would turn? That night, I learned a lesson no manual prepared me for. The battlefield doesn't end when you leave the zone. It shifts to the places that should feel safest. For weeks I tried to fit back in. I forced smiles during Nate's monologues about interest rates, nodded through Mia's tales of gallery openings, even chuckled when Mom hummed her cheerful tune while dusting, as if life here was a scripted sitcom. At night, though, the facade cracked. I'd lie awake, the ceiling fan whirring like a helicopter blade, jolting upright at 3:17 a.m. sweat-soaked, the echo of an explosion rattling my ribs. Yet each morning I descended with coffee, masking the tremors with a steady hand, pretending it was just jet lag. They didn't ask about Afghanistan. Not the nights I rigged repairs with scavenged parts. Not the pilot I coached through a crash landing. They wanted me polished, quiet. A version they could slot beside the gravy boat without unease. So I buried it all, the adrenaline, the grief, swallowing it with each polite nod. But silence isn't peace. It's a cage stitched from duty and denial, and the longer I wore it, the more I faded, not just from their sight but from my own sense of self. The breaking point came at Grandpa's memorial. A Navy vet from Vietnam, a legend in their eyes, his service a badge they wore proudly. I pressed my dress blues, every crease a testament to discipline, hoping they'd finally see me. At the service, cousins droned on. Nathan about tax law, Brent about his logistics firm, while I stood in the back, shoulders squared. When the family photo was called, I stepped forward, naive enough to think I fit. Mom's hand on my arm stopped me. "Let the boys stand center, Elena. Their suits look sharper. Think I was just a prop." I retreated, fading from the frame once more. Afterward, at Aunt Carol's house, casseroles and iced tea flowed, but no one asked about my return. They debated college funds and home renovations, and I sat mute, a stranger in my own skin. I tried again, desperate to connect. Over sweet tea, I shared a light story, how I once jury-rigged a drone circuit with a paperclip during a sandstorm, turning a dire moment into a laugh. Halfway through, Mom sighed. "You've told that before, Elena. It's not like you were out there commanding troops, just fixing toys." Toys. That word hit like shrapnel, reducing years of precision under pressure to child's play. Not the 18-hour shifts. Not the pilot I saved by rerouting a faulty system mid-flight. I didn't argue. What was the use? My hand slipped into my pocket, curling around a worn circuit chip I'd kept, a relic of those nights. No one noticed the faint burn scar on my wrist, but my niece Lily did. 16, quiet, she slid me a note under the table. "What did you really do over there, Aunt Elena?" I smiled, tucking it away like a lifeline, the first sign someone cared to know. It was a Tuesday, the sky gray over Boise, leaves skittering down the drive when everything shifted. I sorted mail, bills, ads, then froze at a Navy envelope, the Department of Defense seal glinting. My hands trembled as I opened it, expecting a condolence or error, but inside was an invitation. A recognition ceremony at the Pentagon for innovative engineers, my name listed with honor. I stared, the paper crinkling in my grip, a validation no one here had offered. That night at dinner, I waited for a pause in their chatter. Nate's gym routine, Mia's exhibit sales. I got something today, I said softly. An invitation from the Pentagon for a ceremony. The table stilled for a heartbeat. I hoped for pride, but Nathan shrugged. Probably a diversity nod. Brent smirked. You weren't exactly building tanks, Elena. The silence crushed me, a weight like concrete overhead. Mom finally looked up. Do you always have to make it about you? That did it. I snatched the letter, tore it in half, and walked upstairs, the sound of their forks a hollow echo. In my room, I fished the pieces from the trash, taping them with shaking hands. I booked a ticket to DC, whispering to the dark, I don't need their approval. I need to be seen. What pushed me to this edge? Years of invisibility, a family blind to my battles. And what comes next? That question burned as I packed, a spark ready to ignite. The war I'd fought was over, but the one for my identity had just begun. The hum of the airplane engine faded as I landed in Washington, D.C., the torn Pentagon invitation taped together in my carry-on, a fragile emblem of my resolve. The cold air bit at my face as I stepped onto the tarmac, my dress blues creased but meticulously cleaned, the loose thread at the collar swaying slightly, a quiet testament to the journey that had brought me here. I'd walked out on Boise's indifference, the shredded letter a rebellion against my family's refusal to see me, and now I stood in a city pulsing with possibility, ready to claim the recognition they'd denied. The distant wail of sirens and the glow of streetlights thrummed around me, a stark contrast to the suffocating quiet I'd left behind in Idaho. What would unfold when I faced those who valued my contributions? That question pulsed through me, a steady rhythm urging me forward into the unknown. Back in Boise, the fallout had already taken root. 2 days after my abrupt departure, my phone buzzed with a terse text from Nate. Mom's a mess. Come back and fix this. I set it aside, checking into a modest motel near the Pentagon, the neon sign outside casting a flickering red hue across my unpacked duffel bag. The room smelled faintly of stale coffee, a reminder of transient nights, but it was mine, a space untainted by their expectations. By evening, Mom's call pierced the quiet, her voice trembling with a mix of worry and reproach. Your dad's furious, Elena. What was that about a ceremony? We need to talk. Reluctantly, I agreed, knowing that dodging this confrontation wouldn't heal the rift that had widened between us. The next day I returned to the family home, the living room thick with an oppressive tension that clung to the air like damp fog. Mom sat on the worn couch, her hands knotted tightly in her lap, while Dad paced like a caged animal, his face a storm of frustration and disbelief. You tore up an invitation? He barked, his voice echoing off the walls. What's gotten into you? I slid the taped letter onto the coffee table, its edges worn and crinkled from my nervous handling. It's from the Pentagon, I said, my tone steady but laced with resolve, honoring my work in Afghanistan. You called it a diversity nod. Mom's eyes widened, her breath catching while Dad's pacing faltered, his boots scuffing the hardwood. We didn't mean it like that, she murmured, her voice soft and uncertain. You never explained what you did out there. A bitter laugh escaped me, sharp and hollow against the room's stillness. I shouldn't have had to. I recalibrated drones under enemy fire, rerouted systems to save a pilot mid-crash landing. You reduced it to toys. Nate wandered in, then Mia trailing behind him, their expressions a mix of wariness and irritation. You're blowing this out of proportion, Nate said, crossing his arms. We didn't ask you to storm off like that. No, I countered, meeting his gaze. But you thrived on my silence, didn't you? I reached into my bag, pulling out a folder of evidence. Emails exchanged with base commanders, detailed logs of my repairs under pressure, even a faded photo of the drone I'd salvaged. I spread them across the table, watching their faces shift from defiance to a reluctant unease. Dad's jaw tightened, his hands balling into fists. That's enough, Elena, he said, his voice hardening. Family doesn't drag this kind of thing into the open. Family, I shot back, stepping closer, doesn't erase me from their lives or mock the scars I carry. I shouldered my bag, the weight of their stares pressing down, and turned to leave. Mom's faint plea, "Don't go, Elena," followed me out, her voice cracking as the door clicked shut behind me. What would they do with this raw truth now laid bare before them? That thought lingered, a thread waiting to be pulled, hinting at a confrontation yet to come. In DC, I threw myself into preparations for the ceremony. I ironed my dress blues with care, the faint burn scar on my wrist. A memento from a near miss with a live wire, glimmering under the light, a silent narrative of survival. The uniform felt heavier than usual, each crease a testament to discipline honed in chaos. I attended alone, no family to witness this moment, the Pentagon's marble corridors looming with an almost reverent stillness. The room filled gradually with women who'd led brigades, designed cutting-edge weaponry, or navigated diplomatic minefields. Figures whose legacies seemed to dwarf my own. I took a seat in the back, my posture rigid, heart pounding a staccato rhythm against my ribs, unsure if I truly belonged among them. The announcer's voice began calling names. Colonel Martinez, General Hayes. Each met with a swell of applause that rippled through the crowd. I folded my hands in my lap, just listening until I heard it. Technical Sergeant Elena Carver. Head swiveled toward me, a murmur rising, and I rose slowly, my boots scuffing softly against the polished floor, warmth creeping up my neck as all eyes settled on me. The screen behind the podium flickered to life, displaying grainy footage, me rewiring a drone circuit board in a swirling sandstorm, my voice steady over the crackling static of a failing comms line. There was no dramatic music, no narration, just the unfiltered truth of that moment. Then he appeared, not a protocol-driven aide but the Secretary of Defense himself. He crossed the room with purpose, his hand extended toward me. "Sergeant Carver," he said, his voice carrying a weight of sincerity, "your ingenuity saved lives out there. We're proud to honor you." A small unit pin gleamed on his lapel, a discreet nod to the covert missions I'd supported, a symbol I'd thought lost to time. My throat tightened, tears pricking at the corners of my eyes. Someone had remembered. Someone had kept my name alive when my own family tried to bury it under trivialities. That night I didn't board a flight back to Boise. Instead I sought out Mara Hensley, a journalist with a reputation for exposing military cover-ups, her byline a beacon for those silenced. In her cluttered apartment, the air thick with the scent of old coffee and printer ink, I laid it all bare. I handed her suppressed reports of faulty equipment I'd flagged, detailed accounts of the pilot's near-miss I'd averted with a last-minute reroute, and a crumpled memo dismissing my concerns as overzealous. Mara's fingers danced across her keyboard, her questions sharp and unrelenting. "Why now?" she pressed, her gaze piercing. "Because I'm tired of being overlooked," I said, my voice firm, "tired of fading into their version of me." 3 weeks later, her article hit the presses. Hidden Heroes, the Cost of Silence in the Air Force. The backlash was immediate and brutal. Accusations of exaggeration swirled, my security clearance was suspended, and emails began vanishing from my inbox like ghosts. It felt like being erased all over again, this time by an official hand. But then the tide turned with a single call. "This is Colonel Hayes from Oversight. We've read the article. Can you testify?" "Yes," I replied without hesitation, my pulse steadying with purpose. I entered a stark, windowless room at the Pentagon, no rank on my collar, no armor to shield me, just the truth in my hands. I placed the logs and emails on the table, the evidence speaking for itself. Mara stood beside me, her presence a quiet strength, and then Sarah, a maintenance tech I'd mentored, joined us, her testimony adding weight. The panel couldn't ignore it. Investigations into equipment failures launched, a commander faced scrutiny, and my record was eventually restored. The cost, though, was a growing chasm from the life I'd known in Boise. Back home, the silence deepened into a palpable void. Nate's texts grew more insistent, demanding us sort this mess out, while Mom's calls pleaded for a return to harmony. I visited once more, the living room a battleground of old habits. "You're shattering this family," Dad said, his tone a mix of anger and exhaustion. "No," I replied, my voice calm but unyielding. "You fractured me first with your indifference." I left, securing a small apartment in DC, the familiar voices of Boise fading into a distant echo. The victory over the military's silence was mine, but it came with isolation. I began volunteering at a veterans workshop, teaching young engineers the tricks I'd learned, their eager questions a balm. What would this triumph demand of me, and how would I reshape my life in this new city? That question hovered, a bridge to a future yet to be built, pulling me toward the next chapter. The soft hum of traffic outside my DC apartment greeted me as I unpacked the last of my belongings, the taped Pentagon invitation now framed on the wall. A quiet victory over the erasure I'd endured. The fallout from Boise had settled into a distant ache, my family's silence a fading echo after months of separation. I'd testified before oversight, exposed the military's buried truths with Mara Hensley, and carved a new life here, far from the indifference that once defined me. The city's rhythm, honking cabs, distant sirens, felt like a heartbeat, a stark contrast to the stifling quiet of my childhood home. This was my space now, and I was determined to fill it with purpose. What remained was to solidify this new identity, and that journey was already underway. Back in Boise, the rift had deepened. A month after my testimony, Nate's text stopped, replaced by a single voicemail from Mom, her voice brittle. "We miss you, Elena. Can we talk?" I listened, the ache sharp, but didn't reply, needing distance to heal. Dad's silence was absolute, a wall I no longer tried to breach. I returned once, the living room a museum of old tensions, Mom's eyes red, Dad's jaw set. "You've changed us," he said, his tone heavy. "I had to," I replied, my voice steady. "You never saw me until I walked away." I left them a folder, logs, the invitation copy, proof of my journey, and drove back to DC, their stunned faces lingering. The break was clean, but it left a scar. I began volunteering at a veterans workshop, teaching young engineers the grit of field repairs, their questions a lifeline. One student, Jake, a wide-eyed 22-year-old, asked about the sandstorm fix. "You turned chaos into control," he said. That stuck with me. In DC, my life took root. The article's impact grew, sparking a congressional hearing on equipment safety. I testified again, Mara's notes in hand, and a new directive emerged: mandatory reviews of field tech. My clearance was fully restored, but the real reward was the connections. Sarah, the maintenance tech from my unit, became a friend, her resilience mirroring mine. We started a support group for vets, meeting in a cramped community center, sharing stories over coffee. One night, a woman named Tara, a former pilot, broke down recounting a crash I'd helped her survive. "You gave me a second chance," she said. That moment shifted something. I wasn't just surviving, I was giving back. The idea for a center grew from those meetings. I pitched it to a nonprofit, envisioning a hub for vets to learn skills, heal, and speak. Donations trickled in, $5,000 from a grateful pilot's family, $10,000 from a defense contractor moved by the article. I enlisted Jake and Sarah, their energy fueling the plan. We found a site in Arlington, a quiet lot near a park, and broke ground 6 months later. The Carver Resilience Center rose, its walls painted with murals by local vets, each stroke a story of survival. The opening day arrived, a crisp October morning, the air tinged with fall. I stood beside Sarah, scissors in hand, as a crowd of vets, families, and officials gathered. "This isn't just a building," I said, my voice clear. "It's a place where no one is erased." Sarah cut the ribbon, tears glistening, and the applause washed over us. Inside, the center buzzed with life. A classroom hummed with Jake teaching circuitry, a lounge offered therapy sessions, and a garden bloomed where vets planted seeds, grounding themselves. I walked the halls, the hum of voices a balm, and sat in the library, pulling out my old journal. I wrote, "They framed me out, convinced me I was nothing. But this center, these people, they're my proof. I became the support I needed." A plaque by the door read, "Strength rises from truth," a nod to my journey. That night, the crowd thinned and I lingered, the empty conference room quiet. On the table lay a blank notebook, waiting for stories, a symbol of voices yet to rise. The months that followed solidified my path. The center thrived, hosting workshops and art exhibits, its reputation growing. I hired a small staff, including Mia, a Boise artist who'd reached out, seeking reconciliation. Her presence was tentative, a bridge to my past, and we worked in silence at first, then with shared laughter. Mom visited once, bringing a childhood sketch of a plane. "I'm proud," she whispered, and we hugged, a fragile piece. Dad remained distant, but Mia's efforts hinted at hope. I kept painting, my canvases now bright with DC skyline, and walked the Potomac, the water reflecting my growth. 6 months later, I stood on my balcony, the city glowing under a pink sunset. The center's success, a $50,000 grant, a new wing planned, filled me with pride. Boise was a memory, its pain softened by distance. I'd rebuilt not just for myself but for others. The war for my identity was won, not with applause but with action. I was whole, at peace, my legacy secure. Hey everyone! Thanks for tuning into the Revenge Tempest channel. If you love this story, please hit that subscribe button and join our amazing community. Drop a comment below letting us know where you watched us from.